on quite well. All right, and that wraps up our Twitter dialogue writing. Now we're going to listen to what we just practiced in an entire dialogue together. So listen carefully, everybody.
I bought a blue button-up shirt through the home shopping channel last week, but the color looks a little off compared to what I saw on TV. I'm a bit agitated.
I've had that experience too. It happens quite often when you buy stuff through the home shopping channels.
You haven't heard the worst of it. I ordered a digital camera last month because they told me it would deliver on that day. But it took days for the product to arrive, and despite it being a fragile product, the packaging was a mess.
Try making a complaint on the company's website.
Of course I did, but all I get is a redundant sorry. It's not like all consumers are made out of money.
I'm suddenly reminded of the catch line, customers always come first.
I'm going to continue to file a complaint.
So there's one word I want to clarify before we go on to more expression. It's the word fragile. Fragile, as I mentioned briefly earlier, we see it in the sticker, the red sticker, particularly often when we go to the airports, right? They slap it onto your luggage before they carousel it away. And now fragile could be pronounced two different ways. In America, or in the American accent, we like to say fragile, fragile. But in the British accent, they like to say fragile. Fragile, although I don't have the accent, it's a little bit more similar to fragile, like a J sound. Fragile as opposed to fragile. And they're both correct. Neither are wrong, but they're just two different accents and two different dialects. So remember the next time you come across the word fragile, fragile, or fragile. All right, and with that, we're ready to move on to more expressions. And today, unfortunately, for some of you guys, I suppose, we're bringing out the more expressions not from the dialogue itself, but from one of my suggestions, because I have many, many in my pot of imaginary products. But anyway, today I want to highlight one different kind of expression. And it is, 이것을 반품시켜야 할지 말지 걱정이네요. Now the man, he was struggling to decide, right? He was struggling to decide whether or not to keep the product or not. He wasn't satisfied with the blue shirt, blue button-up shirt to be more specific. So he can say something like 이것을 반품시켜야 할지 말지 걱정이네요 라고 할 수 있어요. Now, 반품시켜야 할지 말지. Now, there's many, many different ways to say this, but you could say, I'm torn, I'm torn, I'm torn whether 할지 or 말지, not, whether or not, 할지 말지. To 반품하다 is to literally return an item, return an item. So you can say return, 이것은 this이죠. This. So the key expression I want you to remember is I'm torn, whether or not. So remember, one last time, I'm torn, whether or not, to return this, to return this. Now we can utilize this expression, I'm torn, to many different contexts. Second example is, 그 사람과 헤어져야 할지 말지 걱정이네요. 자, 누구랑 헤어진다는 영어로 break up이라고 합니다. break up. 그 사람, 남자 또는 여자에 따라서 break up with him 또는 break up with her 라고도 할 수 있는데요. Now, the key phrase I want you to remember is 헤어져야 할지 말지 걱정이네요. 걱정이네요. I'm torn over whether or not to break up with him. 또는 I'm torn over whether or not to break up with her. Break up with her. So key phrase, remember one more time, I'm torn over whether or not. I'm torn over whether or not. So let's apply it to a different example. 비행기표를 구입할지 말지 걱정이네요. So you can utilize it to many different contexts. It doesn't have to be in one specific topic, but you can discuss it in any other sentences. Today, 비행기표에 대해서도 말할 수 있네요. 비행기표, to buy a plane ticket. 비행기표를 구입하다. To buy a plane ticket. 자, 할지 말지 걱정이네요. I hope you got it by now because it's not a trick question. I'm torn over whether or not to. I'm torn over whether or not to. So one more time, repeat after me. I'm torn over whether or not to buy a plane ticket. And a little bit faster. I'm torn over whether or not to buy a plane ticket. All right. It sounds like you catch on really fast. So we're all ready, right? We're ready to move on to the next segment, which is Twitter Writing 140. Follow me. Twitter Writing 140 is where we take your creative tweets and I help you turn them into more smooth sentence structures. All right, so let's first hear what your examples are.
홈쇼핑은 생방송 중에 구입하는 재미가 있죠. 인터넷 쇼핑하다 보니 3시간밖에 못 잤다. 그런데 컨디션은 의외로 굿.
There's something about shopping that makes me feel really lighthearted and breezy, and yeah, I just love this discussion. But anyway, I love your examples. Let's go ahead and take a closer look at the example and help you translate them into English. 홈쇼핑은 생방송 중에 구입하는 재미가 있죠. I agree. This is my guilty pleasure as well. Now you have strong words here. Home shopping, live, scream, sounds fun.